the credit of the United States government. It is the most powerful institution in the world, in spite of everything. If it were well managed, it would be even more powerful. It certainly doesn't need to go groveling and begging to the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, and these other parasitical bankrupt bankers. Imagine you're going to go to Wall Street and beg those guys to lend you money when the only reason they exist is thanks to federal government bailouts. I mean, what's the point? Eliminate them from the equation. Go to a credit system, and you make this available. So what are you going to do?
Webster, we're almost out of time. And no, hold on. I'm going to let you finish your points.
Okay.
Let me add one little point here. We've got to hurry up and finish your other points now. Then I've got a few closing comments and questions here, but please continue.
You want to rebuild the entire interstate highway system and all bridges. You got to rebuild the entire railway system as fast rail or maglev, and that includes a tremendous expansion of urban mass transit, commuter rail. You got to have a freight rail system. There's a whole immense amount of work to be done on the canals, right? You go into the Tennessee River, Ohio River, places like this. The locks on the canals are breaking down so that the coal can't be shipped. And obviously, we got to keep those coal mines open, as you were saying, right? The rail, the road, the water projects and canals. You got to rebuild the entire electricity grid, and you got to use the most modern form of electricity generation you can find. And I'm afraid solar cells and windmills just won't do it. So you take it from there. Then you've got to do public buildings. You got schools, hospitals, government buildings. You go to any place in the Midwest or any rural place you want, it's going to say Works Progress Administration or Public Works Administration on the City Hall and so forth. Housing, yeah, there's got to be low-cost urban housing, and that could certainly be done much more. You've also got to make sure there's plenty of credit available, for example, for kids who want to go to college, right? Why do we have to pay 3.4% on a federal Stafford loan for somebody to go to college when a zombie banker gets it for 0%? Let's turn the tables. Let's have 0% for kids who want to go to college, and they can pay that back over 30 or 40 years at 0%. So you get the idea. Your goal is to create 30 million new productive jobs at union wages, well paid, not slave labor, not workfare, none of this garbage, high capital investment per job, right? If you give somebody a rake and tell them to go rake leaves, then your capital investment per job is like $10, right? That's a bad joke. The idea with the U.S. is this country has been successful as a high-wage economy, high capital intensity, high energy intensity.
Sure,
right?
let me throw a point in here. I mean, the system is at war against high wage. People don't understand. You just say you have high wages. Suddenly there's more money. All real business and service does better. The oligarchs are waging war on that because they're waging war on the real economy. I mean, I get your point along these lines. We're going to finish your final point here in a moment. But, Webster, how do you stop the oligarchs who want all the free credit for themselves but don't want us to have the free credit? And if somehow talk about giving the public free credit is bad, but giving offshore eugenics-based banks free credit. I mean, you talk about power. If we just got them off our back, we'd be fine. Obama and his globalist controllers are shutting down 1/3 of our power plants right now.
Yeah, see, power is going to go somewhere. And if you don't want them to have power, in other words, Wall Street controls the federal government. That's the essence of the problem. If you don't want that power to go to Wall Street, then you've got to take it yourself. And again, look at Syriza in Greece. If they could go from 4% of the votes to 27% of the votes, we could do something similar here. You look at both major parties agree with austerity, right? Democrats say we want mild austerity. Republicans say we want genocidal austerity. Austerity, the same thing. 80%, 4/5 of the American people say we don't want any cuts in Medicare. You get similar things for Medicaid and for Social Security. Tremendous majorities, 2/3, 3/4, 4/5 say no, hands off our economic rights. If you decide to butt your head against this, it's pointless, and it's economically and politically counterproductive. You've got to have a mass movement that can take power. Now, you look around the world, you'll see governments everywhere are very, very vulnerable. They're all very unstable. Why not? Why not here? If Greece can do something along these lines and actually become a contender for power and maybe take power in the next election, what's preventing it here? Because they're crippled by right-wing libertarian ideology on the one hand and this anarchist, ad busters, Occupy Wall Street. The last point, the fifth point, is international economics. Now, I know I can't go through this, just 2 points about this. One is you're going to need a protective tariff. In other words, if you have all these guys who are exporting the jobs, right? Romney sends jobs overseas. How do you stop that? Well, one way, you're obviously going to tax it, right? Instead of giving a tax bonus for exporting a job, you want to have a tax penalty for exporting a job. But the other thing is you put up a modest protective tariff of 15 or 20%. It changes the entire picture. How can Americans be expected to compete with coolie labor, right? With low-wage sweatshop labor
in India,
in the third world? We don't want that. Why do we have to have that? Who voted for globalization? I never did. We don't want globalization. We're sick of it.
What's sick of it is the globalists brag that they designed it to implode all the economies, not to build up. That's the big lie.
So let's forget the slogans of the libertarian right and the anarchist left and get down to things that really attack the essence of finance capital. The other thing is there is a role for gold in all of this, right? Gold in Bretton Woods had a very important function. It functioned as a kind of reality principle. Not that your credit issue was limited to gold. No. There's not enough gold for that. And we don't want to be deflationary, because that's the problem of going to a gold standard of that kind, is you get tremendous deflation, very, very bad. Look at American history in the late 19th century, right? The whole cross of gold. This was really, really bad. But the positive role of gold under the Bretton Woods system is you want to have gold settlement. In other words, at the end of a year or a couple of years or whatever it is, after all the buying and selling and all the, the exchange going back and forth, two countries are either going to have a deficit or a surplus. And at that point, there is the possible demand to say, you should pay us in gold, not for every transaction, but for the netting, right? The clearing of that entire thing. That's an important reality principle, because the way that the U.S. slipped into this financier control was when the gold convertibility was lifted by Nixon on August 15th, 1971. This meant that the U.S. could just go wild, right?
But there you go. That's exactly what Lew Rockwell, who you would see as somebody you disagree with, said today. He marks that as the time that the banksters fully took over. So do you, but you're diametrically opposed to what he's saying.
Because what he wants to do is to go to a gold coin standard. We have 3 examples of a gold coin standard going back. The British went back to a gold coin standard in 1815, and that's the world of the Dickensian treadmill, a tremendous poverty, tremendous cruelty. The British did it again in the 1920s under Sir Winston Churchill. They went back on the gold standard. The biggest unemployment in world history was in Britain, of an advanced country, was in Britain in the 1920s, and the United States. After the Civil War, we had a very successful greenback system, which worked fine and should have been kept. But the gold...
Webster, I get the fact that if you have free credit or near free credit issued by the state, it cuts out the banksters, it energizes economies, but it also brings its own fraudulent bubbles as well. None of this is a panacea. My issue is the banksters, the oligarchs, the Anglo-American establishment are genocidal eugenicists who have this survival of the fittest social Darwinian view that is not reality-based. So they are the prime enemy. I look at almost anything as better than what they've got.
Yeah, but they're eugenicists, but they're austerity fiends. Right now, it's the austerity
because that brings in their eugenics. That brings in their eugenics, yeah.
And then they say, we'll create a world where you will die and we will triumph. Well, the answer to that is no. And here's a mass movement that says no. And I would urge people, your audience, right, might be a good starting point for some of this, right? We've got to build a broad front. I'm talking about national anti-austerity committees meeting starting in September, because here's what it's going to be. In December, we're going to have the fiscal cliff. This is a Republican slogan, reactionary slogan. Democrats have bought into it. So we're going to have the fiscal cliff, and there's going to be the pressure to have a grand bargain. And the grand bargain is going to be the two political parties, both of them, getting ready, turning on the American people and saying, we're going to flay the American people alive with austerity cuts. We're going to take away economic rights that have been acquired by centuries of labor struggles.
But it's worse than that. It's worse than that. I mean, here's my next question, because now you've had your long 30 minutes breaking this down, and I really find it thought-provoking. How do we deal with a ruling class that raises taxes? Obama says you make a $125,000 a year, $250,000, husband and wife, you're rich, we're going to raise your tax. While Mitt Romney and the rest of them are tax exempt, wrote the laws offshore.
What you do is you agitate for your own tax. In other words, if you say no cuts in Social Security, no cuts in Medicare, and unlimited unemployment for 99 weeks and beyond, the 99ers and everybody else, the next question they'll ask you is, oh, and how are you going to pay for that? By taxing Wall Street, by taxing Wall Street turnover. We want 1% coming out of every one of those flash trades at 1 million transactions per second. That's how we pay for it. In other words, it is also true that you could tax the 1% much more than they're taxed already, and this would not be enough to really even begin to deal with the needs of the social safety net.
Yeah, but they break down those actuaries in the fake 1% that keeps their money here, who's not ultra elite and exempt like Google and General Electric offshore. I mean, the truth is they've got how many 30-something trillion they admit offshore they won't bring in, and then they've got hundreds of other trillions.
Hey, let's have, in the New Deal, there was a really good thing, an undistributed profits tax. In other words, if you want to hoard money, and they say, the companies in the U.S. have $3 trillion. Oh, and they're so afraid. They don't have confidence. They don't have certainty. They're afraid to invest. Let's help them to invest. Let's say if you don't invest it, you're going to pay a 5 to 10% undistributed profits tax, and let's supplement that with an offshore tax, right? In other words, if you have an offshore account, we're going to have, we want 5 or 10% of that going to the federal treasury. And when I say the federal treasury, for most of these things, it's half for the feds, half for the states, because the states are the ones who've got to maintain the highways and the education systems and through the municipalities, right? The obvious things, the fire department.
Well, Webster, here's the problem. Listen, I understand the engine of wealth, of productivity, of human ingenuity, of machines. We could all live like kings and queens. The oligarchs understand that. Their instinct is shut it down, keep us in squalor, keep us poor. My issue is, you get 60 million people on food stamps. All this happens. That's actually what the establishment wants.
No,
they have
not anymore.
Yeah.
No. They want to throw you off because they want you to die. See, this is the difference, right? Obama says to the ruling class, "Keep me. I'm killing them, slowly on the installment plan. I'm making them die the death of 1,000 cuts. It's gradual. The resistance is minimal. He betrayed these guys in Wisconsin, wouldn't fight for them. And the ruling class says, no, it's too slow. We want the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right? We want a machine gun. We want the atomic bomb on these entitlements because we're not paying, because we're the goddamn ruling class. So at that point, Obama out, they think, Romney in. Now, Romney is so inept that he may not be able to win even with the backing of the ruling class. This is now quite possible, and you can see it. But the ruling elite says, we're done with entitlements, right? You have no economic rights. We are going to flay you alive. Obama is just, he's getting in the way.
That's my final question here. Webster, you've got 1.4 billion bullets being bought, clear tyranny being rolled out. You're acting like they're inept. No, they got a plan to shut things down and take over, get everything with their corporate welfare, and they're gearing up to, I've got Army documents that they admit are real, for re-education camps, mass arrest. I mean, it's like Kim Jong-il took a...
Important principle of strategy is you can't run after every deployment of the enemy. Every time you get, beat up by the